And in terms of 8K, what can I say? We love pixels. The more the merrier. The crisper the image, the more the pixels. So this is your opportunity to learn from leading Hollywood experts about the latest developments in 8K, where the pixels are so tiny that the image is ultra lifelike. The session will be moderated by Juan Reyes, Executive Director of the 8K Association, and he'll tell you more about the association, and he will introduce his fellow panelists. So relax, enjoy, and stick with us. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Reyes, and I am the Executive Director of the 8K Association. We are very happy to be here to talk to you about, some of the latest developments in 8K, its role in the creative process, with a couple experts that I'll introduce here in just a moment. The 8K Association has been around for many years. We are a nonprofit organization, and the goal is really to work with our members to help educate, to help promote the advancement of 8K technologies and the 8K ecosystem. And so as a part of that, I want to touch base a little bit on where we are in the ecosystem today. Many times people have been talking about, well, where are we? What's going on? How much of the ecosystem is actually using 8K? And as you can see here from the slide, pretty much every area in the content production, content creation process is using 8K. Content creation is there. We have the capturing side, editing, encoding, distribution, decoding, audio receivers, as well as displays. And one of the areas that I'm wanting to focus on today is really the area of content creation. Within content creation, you can see that there are many organizations that are developing content. We have, as you can see here, IMAX. We have Warner Brothers, Savage Studios, Amazon Studios, the virtual production division. So there's already organizations, studios creating, 8K content today. And so now what I want to do is talk a little bit about our participants. We have participants here from Warner Brothers, participants here from IMAX as well. At this point, I'd like to introduce my panelists. We have Greg Chacho, the VP of Original Content Post and Image Capture from IMAX. We have Michael D. Smith from Wavelet Consulting LLC, who is a consultant to Warner Brothers Discovery. And at this point, if I could have each of you just describe a little bit about, the work you do at your organization, starting with you, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here. So I'm Greg Chacho, as he mentioned, and I handle original content, which is, we call it IMAX 1.0. It's basically all of our documentaries that originated on film, 65 millimeter and 70 millimeter distribution, as well as anything that we do in our Film for IMAX program. We have a selection of films every year that we designate for Film for IMAX, films like Oppenheimer and Dune, et cetera. So we work with filmmakers from pre-production all the way through to delivery to make sure that whatever they intended is actually seen on the IMAX screen. And hand it over to Mike.
All right, I'm Mike Smith. I'm an industry consultant focused on image quality, compression, and intellectual property. And I've been a consultant for Warner Brothers for 20 years about, and mainly focused on image quality, new formats, and I've been doing things like Blu-ray disc and industry groups like UHD Alliance, SMPTE, and anyway, I'm here today to talk about their scanning, right?
Great. So as you can see, we've got an amazing panel here. So I want to talk a little bit about, each of your organizations and the work around 8K. Greg, can you let us know, I know with IMAX there are a lot of discussions about large format. If you could talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in, with 8K and even beyond 8K from a resolution perspective.
Sure. So we're in a little bit of a unique perspective in that our 65 millimeter film is the largest film format ever devised. So we really want to be scanning at a very high resolution and have been for over 20 years. We've been scanning in 8K for over 20 years. It's becomes challenging because there's not a lot of manufacturers out there that make gear that can do that, but we do have that. We just bought a new scanner recently, but basically when we were distributing and exhibiting it, those of you who out there, raise your hand if you've ever seen an IMAX documentary on film. Been to a science museum, one of the what we call institutional theaters, so it looks amazing. Who saw Oppenheimer on 70 millimeter film? So anyone that saw that saw a print that came off the original cut negative. There was no IP and IN, and it was as close as you can get to the negative that Hoyte and Christopher shot. So we have to do that service, right? We have to do that film frame justice. So we do scan at 8K, even though we know that DCI delivery is 4K and to the home is 4K and hopefully 8K soon. But we have to make sure we preserve that resolution best we can.
Yeah, so Mike, give us a little bit of insight on what Warner Brothers is doing around the 8K and higher resolutions.
Yeah, so there's about 8,000 films in the archive, and over the last several years, there's been about 500 of them that have been scanned at 4K or 8K. In the last 3 years, we've really started the 8K work, and there's been 20 films that have been scanned at 8K. And every time the business wants to basically touch the negative, they treat it like it's maybe the last time they'll ever be able to touch the negative, because things happen, right? It's a physical asset. There have been fires and whatever in the past. So they basically, the approach is if they're going to basically scan for preservation or for a new master, they'll actually do a scan test at 4K and 8K for several scenes of the title, and they'll actually do a blind test with several experts at the motion picture imaging group, and they'll determine whether they can see a difference. And if they can, then they'll continue, and it justifies doing the 8K work and the additional expense and file size and everything like that. And so that's basically the process now, that they're scanning not just for new masters, but for preservation point.
Yeah, I find that very amazing, and I'm sure everybody else will, understanding just all of the science and the work that goes into, archive restoration process. The fact that you guys are doing these tests, the blind tests, to have experts come in and look, are we able to pull more from this element that we're scanning, where it makes sense to go 8K or higher, or is 4K enough? And this is a good point to where we can talk a little bit about, with you, Mike, and Warner Brothers, one of the recent 8K scans that's been announced in the market related to the Dirty Harry title. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's similar to what I just said, that they did a test, right? And they determined that the negative could benefit from an 8K scan. And so they scanned that with the Laser Graphics Director, is their sort of premier scanner device. And they went through mastering. I think for that title, I'm not sure if they actually did dirt and scratch removal at 8K or if it was done at 4K. But basically the work and the test they've done basically convinced everyone that you get a better 4K master even if you scan at a higher rate. Oversampling works basically. And so there's a lot of theoretical background of sampling rates and line, basically with film, the best, generally the resolving power of film is about 80 line pairs per millimeter. And so with a 35 millimeter, negative, you have about 25 millimeters of film width, which leads to about 2,000 line pairs per film width. So if you sample it at the Nyquist rate, that's 2 samples per 1 line pair, you get 4K. If you want to oversample, then you would do 8K or 6K or something like that. Now, when you go to large format, like 65 millimeter, you have twice as much film width. So instead of having 25 millimeters, you have about 50 millimeters. So you have 8,000 line pairs. That leads to 8,000 samples per width for an 8K scan just at the Nyquist rate. If you want to oversample, then you would go even higher than that. So anyway, so there's a sort of technical backbone to this whole thing of like how much resolution can you get for film, but not all titles have that detail. Maybe it's the lenses they used, or the film stocks didn't actually have that resolving power. So it's not a one size fits all approach, basically.
And by the way, when you talk about large format, there is 70 millimeter, which when you see something is in 70 millimeter, it's in 70 millimeter width. That's 5 perfs. So I turn that on its side and multiply that by 3 times for IMAX, 15 perf, 65 origination. That's much higher. It's 10 times the surface area about than 35 millimeter 4 perf.
So more pixels is better in most cases, because as you said, there are certain elements older that you're really not able to pull more. And I've seen some of these tests myself. You're taking an 8K scan, looking at a 4K scan, and then comparing the two, and you can definitely see more detail when you take the 8K down-res it to 4K as opposed to just doing a straight 4K scan. And then talking about, some of the titles, I know that, IMAX, we're working on Chapter 51. It's something you could touch on a little bit as well.
Yeah, there's some demo material you have at the booth too. So Chapter 51 is a film by Tyler Shields, who you may not know in the motion picture world, but he's a fairly well-known stills photographer, and he does large format. And so one of the films he's done recently is made up of every format pretty much that existed from film, from Super 8 all the way to R format. And it's kind of cool. In a way, it's kind of a sales tool for film, and you can take a look at it and see, how amazingly beautiful some of the images look. And I think that the clips that we have in the booth there are all the 65 millimeter shots that are in the film. And one of the things that's amazing is we actually had a filmmaker over into our color suite one day, and he looked at some of the material we were showing him that we had mastered in 8K, some of the clips, and said, I don't understand. Why does this look so good? I go, what do you mean? He goes, I'm shooting 8K material all the time, and it doesn't look this good. I said, well, what are you shooting on? And he mentioned a digital camera that is capable of 8K. He said, well, what was this shot on? I said, first of all, this film is 30 years old. I was, what? Yep. And I actually had a film strip. I brought one and I showed him. That's it. So that's why it looks so good. We were future proofing for 8K, since 1972.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if you have a chance to come by the booth, we're in the West Hall, 3942. Got a great demonstration of a little segment of the Chapter 51 title that Greg was talking about here. And part of this is just to let you all know and understand where we are in some of the advancements and things that have been available today and using 8K technology today. And another example of that was the recent 8K scan and distribution, or not so much the distribution, but they demonstrated at a theater of Purple Rain. You could touch a little on that.
Yeah. So a similar process. We did the test, right? And we determined 8K was the choice to make. And the other piece I didn't mention with the new scanners also is high dynamic range. So most of this time when you operate the camera-based scanners, there's also line-based scanners, but not the laser graphics is a camera-based scanner. You actually do multiple exposures per frame to basically get a long exposure and a short exposure to basically reveal more density range on the negative, and that leads to more information, which is the point. And so not just resolution of more pixels, but they're better pixels, because they go deep into the density range of the negative. And so that leads to, I think we did Purple Rain disc release, and then also there was a Dolby Cinema release in theaters. That's the high dynamic range theatrical sort of experience.
Yeah, and I saw the news about, coming out with a new, 4K Blu-ray remastered using these 8K scans, Purple Rain for Very Hairy. And then you talked a little bit about the scanning and the higher resolution and the dynamic range. And you and I had an interesting conversation the other day about some of the noise and artifacts that that you're able to actually see from these high resolution scans with high dynamic range. And maybe you could touch on that piece a little.
Yeah, so basically the scanner is got a digital sensor in it, and it's taking a picture of a picture, right? It's taking a picture of a negative, and that camera sensor has noise in it, separate from the film grain noise of the film element. And so, typically the creative people involved in the film will pick the film stocks, and control the lighting and exposure to basically control the film grain visibility in the film material. And sometimes it's part of the creative aesthetic of a scene, or flashback has more grain or something like that. Sometimes dreamy scenes have very small grain, so it looks different. But every scan kind of has both film grain in it and camera scanner noise in it. And so we've done some research projects on basically taking even more than the the high dynamic range, long and short exposures, but taking multiple exposures of the same piece of film and basically averaging the results to eliminate the scanner noise, which is a temporally random kind of read noise in the sensor device. And that leads to basically preservation of the film grain, which is part of the element, but you get rid of the scanner noise, which nobody wants. So.
Yeah, it's similar technique. Those of you who shot still cameras doing bracketing, basically where you take a low exposure and high exposure and tone map them. So the laser graphics you can do a single flash, 2 flash, 3 flash. They call it HDR. We're not really you don't have to make an HDR image. But we found that pretty helpful in certain situations.
And I know you and I, Greg, had a conversation about some of the work you do on the scanning and the cleanup and sometimes upresing if necessary to 8K or greater. If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, what kind of conversation will we have here without bringing up AI, right? It's getting better and better. Who out there? I know this might be not something a lot of people have seen, but who's seen Starlight? Topaz Starlight. We have one. Okay, so go take a look. We talk about generative AI all the time, and I have this term that I kind of coined called restorative AI. And it's the mindset. It's not anything different. We just want something that actually will look as good as possible, still maintaining the creative intent of the original. We did Queen for live in Montreal at IMAX. We did Stop Making Sense, Talking Heads. We just released Led Zeppelin recently and are coming up with Pink Floyd live in Pompeii and John and Yoko 1-to-1. And as you can imagine, there's all kinds of archival material in there. And so we don't always control that. These are not IMAX originated documentaries, so we don't have the film, unlike a lot of our nature and other science documentaries we've had where we actually produce those. So we have to take the elements the best we can, right? And so one of the things we do is go through a restoration process. We have our own restoration called DMR, and that's a grain and noise kind of reduction system that's continuously variable from 0 to 100%. And we do that with the filmmakers in our theater, 66-foot theater, just to make sure that anything that we do is seen in a similar situation as when you see it over at City Walk or in Lincoln Square or the BFI in London. So you have to make sure to apply these technologies kind of in the situation, right? You can't make these decisions on a 75-inch display in a small room because they're not going to feel the same way. And those same kind of techniques are also applied to the IMAX enhanced home picture as well. Different settings because it will feel differently to you. And so I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, absolutely. It touches on it great. And some of the work you're dealing with on, denoising and cleaning things up and, the ability to upscale with some of the latest technologies around AI with some of the titles that you were talking about. And then on, you, Mike, you mentioned that Warner has been scanning on 8K for quite some time with some of their library. I'm curious if you could touch on, what some of the bigger title names are that have been scanned in 8K.
Yeah, I don't have the whole list here, but somebody does. But one thing that just so basically the 65 millimeter titles obviously get there's more likely to be a need for 8K. So I know Ben-Hur was done that way, and 2001. So 2001 was one of our first. I think it was the first and only actual 8K release to the home through NHK when NHK launched their 8K television broadcasting through the satellite a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was an interesting time for those of you who weren't aware. As 8K was developing, NHK had a big push to broadcast 8K, get some manufacturers to create the 8K televisions, and as a result of that, to Mike's point, that they went ahead and scanned, remastered the 2001 Space Odyssey and broadcast it in NHK in 8K, over the air. So that was a great advancement, and things are continuing to advance. And one of the things we talked about in regards to like deliverables, we were having a conversation about the IMF format, which is basically, a package and a format specification designed for the delivery of content. And you were talking, Mike, a little while ago about how it's recently been updated to be able to support 8K. So maybe, either of you can touch on that.
So it's not finished yet. So I'm working on drafting the updates to the standard. And that's underway in the SMPTE organization. But basically it's going to add 8K resolution to, the, the, the standard IMF format. IMF stands for Interoperable Master Format, and it's a sophisticated, format for describing service masters and all the versions that come with it. So you can have different edits and things like that, and there's a powerful framework to basically describe those without duplication. But to date, first it started with HD and it was extended to 4K. And, because Warner's doing these 8K, scans, there's some interest in being able to have a standard interoperable format for the result. And so that's what the motivation is. So we're expecting probably to maybe have a plug fest later this year and then finalize the standard at the end of the year.
Yes, as you can see, there's a lot more that goes into what we're talking about here, the 8K scanning, 8K resolution, the deliverable part of it. There's many different organizations involved. So we're really able to demonstrate here today that the 8K ecosystem is truly evolving and advancing so that we can get closer and closer to that day where, consumers are able to deliver or to receive, 8K content at their home on their, of course, larger than life 8K displays. So it's an amazing opportunity and amazing things that are happening now and advancing, in the world of 8K. But the scanning piece is really such an important part because as they've both been talking about, there's a lot of, old content, archival content that you want to make sure you're capturing the most data from it to make sure that it is future ready so that even if today, we're scanning in 8K, but we're doing our cleanup, mastering it down in 4K, we've got that 8K master that's ready so that down the road where there is more of a market, more capabilities, more affordable dirt and cleanup costs, that can help. And I think that's one of the big factors, just to kind of let everybody know. Maybe one of you guys can talk a little bit about, the difference in cost on cleanup from a 4K scan to an 8K scan.
Well, I mean, one of the things about the layer-based approach that we all take with color managed workflows is you can do that work on the 4K and then apply the 8K to it, right? So all that work that you did can just be applied just like you're relinking a high-res file if you're editing it, right? So it's just basically crunch time and in storage, really. It's different.
Yeah, I don't personally have any numbers to share, unfortunately, because it's not my department.
That's going to be a constant thing, right? Processors getting faster. We're working in cloud enabled and cloud processor enabled, where you can just throw whatever you need at it for a certain project. So bringing the capex to opex when you need it.
Yeah, and so now moving forward with everything going on in 8K, your respective studios are obviously doing a lot of that in regards to the scanning piece. I'm curious to know if any of you have any insights in regards to how each of your studios is looking to incorporate and take advantage of 8K as things are moving forward. We have you, Mike, talk to now.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to continue to, whenever we touch the negative, right, we're going to evaluate whether we're going to do 8K or even higher scanning, really. Cause the scanner we have now actually, I think the highest mode is 13.5K, which is a lot of data, right? Anyway, so we'll continue basically, preserving the titles, for archiving purposes and also remastering them as the business decides there's a, market for that, I think.
Yeah, same with us. And we've been doing this obviously for years, but now our director scanner is capable of doing, if you look at the 13.5K that Mike was talking about, again, turn that on its side, multiply it by 143, where, ours is about, 15 to 16K, let's say. And then of course, that's kind of, we call that our digital negative. So you take your DNEG, from there, we can produce any deliverable the client wants. So, a common workflow for a recent, film that we just did, go see Sinners out in the theater soon, is we scanned for a particular deliverable at 4K, and then they decided to do a 25% push in on the shot, and so they just reordered it in 8K, and all we have to do is requeue it and spit out an 8K without having to rescan. No, don't have to put the film up, and filmmakers love when you don't have to put their film up again. So that really helped quite a bit. And then one thing I will say about, I don't know, I don't want to jump ahead if you have any closing questions, but one thing I do want to say about 8K is for those of you out there that think, oh, well, 4K looks just great, right? Two things. One is, your TVs are getting bigger and bigger, right? I know it's a cliche, but like your 75 is the new 65. You can go to Costco and buy a 100-inch TV for $1,700 now. Still might seem like a lot of money, but it's not in the grand scheme. You know, if you're able to buy that 65 at that same cost 3 years ago, you might want to do that. The other thing is it's not about counting pixels. You know, we all went through this years ago. There's this theater in the Hollywood called the Pacific Theater that was used as kind of a lab for a long time, and people were so concerned about counting. Can you see the pixels? If you can see the pixels, that's really bad. But there's something to be said about the feel, the three-dimensional feel. For those of you who saw Oppenheimer on film that came from that cut and egg, there's something that you can't really explain. You're like, it just looked better, it looked more real. You can't count those pixels because it's not pixels, right? It's a 70 millimeter print. But there's something to be said about the emotional feeling, and that's been proven. So we want to make sure that we keep immersion. IMAX is all about immersion and having that immersive experience, both on the picture and sound side. And so why wouldn't you want to, all other things being equal, color sampling, bit depth and everything, why wouldn't you want a higher resolution to experience that in?
And then that is a great point. And as part of this, to talk about your comment about the super immersion, you know, last year, the 8K Association developed a white paper where we touch a lot on the science. We touch a lot about the user experience, the business side of it. And one of the major areas we focus on is that super immersive experience, that super realistic feel that you have when you're looking at a large, to your point, 75, 85, 93 and higher screen with some 8K content. It's something that you just really can't describe. It's something that you feel because you're so much more immersed in this large screen as you are with, you know, some of the IMAX movies that, you know, you guys have and that you guys have also, you know, released and distributed as well. So it's a great new thing, new opportunity. All of these, you know, extra pixels, more pixels is better pixels, as we say, you know, with your large format, you know, negatives and you guys as well. And so I think as far as some, you know, last words for our audience, anything else each of you can basically talk about to say what within the Hollywood community, within the industry, do we need to do to really try to help promote 8K?
So one topic that doesn't get mentioned a lot, which is important, is lenses, actually. So lenses, to have a lens that can resolve 8K, it's harder to make that lens than one that can resolve 4K or HD. So I think there needs to be effort on that, and it's you know, putting a poor lens on a high resolution camera, you're not going to get more, right? So I think that's something the industry could work on developing and making more widely available high quality lenses.
It's all about MTF.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is a very, very valid point. As you heard, there's been a lot of talk about the science, the scanning piece, and even the lenses. Many people don't think, well, you know, yeah, you get a nice lens, but ability to be able to resolve 4K, 8K, you want to make sure you got the right lens. There's a lot of cameras out there. You can see them out here on the show floor, 6K, 8K, 12K, you know, 17K even was announced recently. So there's a lot going on here.
One of the things that's nice about this laser graphics scanner is it has a really good 8K lens and it's not trivial, increase the cost, et cetera, like that. So anyway, that's why we like that scanner.
Yeah, and so with that, any last words from you guys to talk about our audience and the education perspective on 8K, things that you see in the future for 8K from your respective organizations?
I'm not going to say anything more about IMAX. I think you get what we're talking about, but I will say one thing is getting a proper quality 8K to your home. In this case, I'm saying for like an IMAX enhanced title, when that comes, is bandwidth is coming down, right? The bandwidth costs are coming down. You probably look at your Spectrum bill or whatever your provider is, and they keep upping your bandwidth, but the price stays the same, right? So encoding efficiencies are getting better with H.266 around the corner, AB1, et cetera. So that's good. We want good 8K pixels. We don't want to try to shove 8K down a 4K optimized pipe, and you may not see the benefits. So that's what we're looking for in the future.
Any last words from you, Mike?
I mean, I think I got my points in, yeah.
Indeed. And so I want to invite all of you to come out to the 8K Association booth. We're in the West Hall, 3942. There we've got some great demonstrations of 8K. We've got some 8K content examples. We've got a clip from the Chapter 51 in 8K. We've got 8K gaming over 120 hertz. There's a lot to see. We have other member companies there demonstrating some of their content, their upscaling capabilities. I invite you all to join, and I want to really, really thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mike, for participating in this panel. We hope you all found it to be very informative, entertaining. We wish you all a great rest of the NAB, and please come down to the 8K Association booth and say hi. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.